He put his feet on my coffee table, looked at my daughter, and laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a polite laugh, not the laugh of someone who caught themselves doing something inappropriate and is trying to smooth it over. A laugh that said, with complete and total ease, "I own this room and everyone in it." And sitting right there next to him in the house I paid for, in the living room I furnished piece by piece over 23 years, in the home I built from a down payment I saved while working 2 jobs and raising a child alone, was my daughter, the girl I gave everything to, the girl I stayed up for and worked for and cried for and sacrificed for in 100 ways she will never fully know. And she went completely, utterly, devastatingly quiet. I want you to sit with that image for a moment before I tell you anything else, because every single thing I am about to share with you, every decision I made, every moment I stayed silent, when every instinct I had was screaming at me to speak, every night I lay in bed telling myself just a little longer, give him a little more time, don't be the difficult mother. Every single one of those moments led to that one exact second. His feet on my table, my daughter unable to speak, me sitting in my own home, feeling like I had to ask permission to take up space in it. But here is what you do not know yet, and this is the part I need you to understand, because this is what makes what happened next matter. You do not know what I had found in my trash can exactly 3 hours before that moment. You do not know what I was holding in my pocket when I walked into that living room. You do not know what number I had stared at on my phone calculator screen while standing alone in my kitchen with the kind of stillness that only comes when a truth you have been circling for weeks finally lands directly in front of you. And you absolutely do not yet know what I said, because I did say something. After 5 months of watching and waiting and giving benefit of the doubt that I now understand was never deserved, after 5 months of biting my tongue until I am surprised it did not bleed, I finally opened my mouth. And what came out of it, in my own living room, on an ordinary Wednesday evening, changed everything that came after. But you cannot understand why I said what I said, or why it landed the way it did, without understanding who I am, without understanding what that house means to me. Without going back all the way back to the Saturday morning, he first walked through my front door with 1 duffel bag, a borrowed smile, and 6 words that I would spend the next 5 months turning over in my mind like a stone I could not put down. So let's go back. My name is Patricia Johnson. I am 54 years old. I have been a mother for 27 years. And a single mother for 18 of them. My daughter Claire was 9 years old when her father decided that the life we had built together, the shared mortgage, the Sunday dinners, the school pickups, the ordinary, beautiful weight of a family, was not the life he wanted anymore. He left on a Thursday. I remember it was a Thursday because I had to take Claire to soccer practice the following Saturday. And I remember standing on the sidelines watching her run across the field and thinking that this was now my life, just me and her and the field and the drive home, and that I had to make it enough. I had to make it more than enough. He took the golf clubs and the second car and a suitcase he had apparently packed over several days without me noticing. He left me with a 9-year-old daughter, a mortgage I had no idea how to carry alone, a refrigerator that needed to be replaced, and a choice that nobody tells you about in advance. You can fall apart, or you can figure it out. I figured it out. I worked the way that only people who have had their safety net pulled out from under them understand how to work. Extra shifts at a job that did not love me back but paid reliably. Evening freelance work in the early internet years, the kind that paid in small amounts but added up. I learned to repair small things around the house myself, because I could not afford to call someone every time something broke. And in those years, something was always breaking. I bought Claire's school clothes from secondhand shops and told her they were vintage, and she believed me until she was 13, and by then I had enough saved that it did not matter anymore. I gave her piano lessons and soccer cleats, and a proper birthday party every single year. I gave her a good school and a reliable car when she was 16 and college tuition when the time came. And I did all of it while being the only name on the mortgage, the only name on the insurance, the only name on every bill that arrived in that mailbox every month without pause. I tell you all of this not to ask for credit. I tell you this so you understand exactly what it meant when I say the word home. Because to most people, a house is a structure. 4 walls, a roof, an address. To me, this house is a document. Every room in it is a chapter of my own history. The kitchen where I stood at midnight eating cold soup because I had run out of energy to heat it. The hallway where I sat on the floor and allowed myself to cry the night Claire got her college acceptance letter, because I had not permitted myself to believe it would actually happen until I was holding the paper in my hands. The guest room, the very guest room that would one day belong to Derek, which I had repainted 3 times over the years, because I kept changing my mind about which color made me feel most like myself when I walked past it. I own that house. Not just on paper. I own it. In every possible sense of that word. And I need you to carry that knowledge with you through everything I am about to tell you. Claire and Derek had been together for 4 months when she called me on a Tuesday evening in the early fall. It was 8:47 at night, I remember, because I had just sat down with a cup of tea and a book I had been trying to finish for 3 weeks. I had been anticipating 15 minutes of quiet. I picked up on the second ring because I always pick up for Claire. She had a specific voice that evening. If you are a mother, and particularly if you are a mother who has had to navigate a careful relationship with an adult child close enough to be honest, careful enough not to push them away, you know exactly the voice I am describing. It is a voice that has been rehearsed, at least a little. It has a brightness that is slightly too controlled, a casualness that is slightly too practiced. It is the voice of a person who loves you enough to try to ask you something difficult in the gentlest possible way. She told me that Derek had been laid off 3 weeks earlier. The whole department, she said. Company-wide restructuring. Not his fault. He had interviews already lined up. He was about to turn a corner. He just needed somewhere to stay for a little while, because his current situation, a friend's spare room, was becoming complicated. She asked if he could use my guest room. I asked how long. She said a few weeks, maybe a month at the outside, worst case scenario. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about what I knew of Derek from our 2 previous meetings, the kitchen table introduction with iced tea and easy conversation, the birthday dinner where he fumbled his card long enough that I quietly covered the check without making a production of it. I thought about the way Claire had looked at him at that dinner. She had not looked at anyone like that in 2 years. Not since the breakup that left her quiet and careful for a long time afterward. And so I said yes. I said yes because I love my daughter. I said yes because I genuinely believe in second chances and in the human reality that sometimes life pulls the rug out from under people through no fault of their own. I said yes because company layoffs are real, and 3 weeks of unemployment does not make a person a freeloader, and I was not going to penalize a young man for something the economy did to him. What I did not yet understand, could not yet understand, because I had no evidence for it, was the crucial difference between a person who is down on their luck and a person who has discovered that being down on their luck is a remarkably comfortable way to live when someone else is willing to carry the weight. That understanding would come. It would take 5 months and 2 folded receipts, but it would come. He moved in on a Saturday, 1 duffel bag, 1 backpack. He shook my hand at the door with a firm, practiced grip, the kind of handshake men learn when they are taught that handshakes make impressions. And he looked me straight in the eye and said the words I would spend the next 5 months thinking about in the quiet hours, after everyone else was asleep. 2 weeks, Mrs. Johnson. Job starts Monday. I smiled. I showed him to the guest room. I pointed out where the towels were kept and told him to help himself to anything in the kitchen. I had no idea those 6 words were going to echo around my house for 5 months. Week 1 was genuinely fine. I want to be precise about this because I think honesty matters more than a tidy narrative. Derek was pleasant during week 1. He was considerate. He kept the guest room tidy. He said good morning. He carried heavy boxes from my garage to the corner without being asked, which was more than some people I had paid to do it. He asked me questions about the neighborhood. He complimented my cooking in a way that seemed, at least in week 1, sincere rather than strategic. He seemed like a person passing through a temporary difficulty. And that was exactly what I had been told to expect. Week 2 started a subtle shifting. Not dramatic, nothing you could point to directly and say, "There, that is the problem." The dishes in the sink began taking slightly longer to find their way to the dishwasher. The morning greetings got shorter. I would come downstairs at 7:30 in the morning, showered and dressed with my coffee made, and Derek's door would still be closed. By 9, he would emerge, unhurried, and make himself breakfast in a kitchen that still smelled like my coffee. The scrolling. That was the thing I noticed most in week 2. In the evenings, he sat on my couch with his phone, and it was not the scrolling of an anxious person. It was not the constant checking, email refreshing, restless behavior of someone whose mind was occupied by a job search. It was deep, content, settled scrolling. The phone behavior of a man whose afternoon was entirely his own. I told myself, he is decompressing. Job loss is a psychological shock even when it is not your fault. Rest is valid. Give him space. Give him time. Week 3. Claire visited on the weekend. I made dinner for all 3 of us and watched them together on the couch after we ate, and I saw how she looked at him, that specific look I had noticed at the birthday dinner, and I held my peace. He was funny with her, attentive. He made her laugh twice at the dinner table. She looked happy. I told myself that was enough. Week 4, I asked. I kept my voice light and my face neutral, passed the bread, and asked how the job search was going. Derek smiled in a way that took up very little energy and said there were things in the pipeline, said the market was a little slow right now, said he was being strategic, not just taking anything, looking for the right fit. Strategic. I ate my dinner. I said that sounded wise. Later that night, I lay in bed and thought about that word for longer than I should have needed to. Strategic. I had worked since I was 16 years old. I had been the primary financial support for a child since I was 36. Not once in any of that had I described unemployment as a strategy. Not once had I had the luxury of waiting for the right fit when the mortgage was due regardless. But I said nothing. It was only week 4. I kept eating my own food and sharing my home and telling myself he just needed more time. Month 2 arrived. The house had begun to change in the way that shared spaces change when one person is occupying them more than their share. Not dramatically. Derek was not a chaos creator. He was something more insidious than that. He was a gradual encroacher. Small things accumulated without confrontation. A pair of his sneakers appeared near my front door, not in the entryway closet, where shoes belonged beside the door, in the way. His charger became a permanent fixture in the hallway outlet, stretching its cord across the baseboard in a way I had to step over on the way to the bathroom at night. A specific coffee mug one I had bought for myself, a heavy ceramic one I had a fondness for, became his mug. It was always on his side of the coffee table. I bought another mug for myself and said nothing about it. These are small things. I am aware they are small things, but I want you to understand the nature of how territory gets taken. It is never in one dramatic land grab. It is always in accumulations of small things, each one technically deniable, each one just barely insufficient to justify a conversation, all of them together, building into something that changes the feel of a space at a level below what you can easily articulate. Month 2 is also when I started to notice Claire's exhaustion. She visited most weekends, which I loved. She had always been someone with energy to spare. She had gotten that from somewhere, certainly not from me. I have always had to work for my energy. But in month 2, the energy was different. She sat on my couch with the particular boneless quality of someone whose reserves are running low. She laughed less quickly. She ate more at my table than she usually did, with a focused appreciation that made me think she was not eating as well at home as she should have been. I asked, once, how things were going financially. I kept it gentle. I said I had just been thinking about her and wondering. She deflected with a quickness that told me she had been deflecting this question from herself for a while already. Everything was fine, she said. She was just busy. She was just tired. Work was picking up. I did not push. But I started paying closer attention. Month 3. I came home early one day for a dentist appointment. I had rescheduled twice already. It was a Tuesday, 2 in the afternoon. I opened my front door and found Derek on my couch, in the position that had by now become his default configuration. One leg stretched along the cushions, one foot on my coffee table, laptop on his stomach, the particular, complete ease of a person with nowhere to be and no urgency about it. He sat up when I came in. That small adjustment. He always made that small adjustment when I appeared unexpectedly. A brief performance of awareness that he was a guest. A performance that lasted about 30 seconds before he relaxed back into the original position. I asked if he had been home all day. He said yes, he had been doing some research. Job research, he said. When I did not respond immediately, I said, that was good. I went to my bedroom to change for the dentist. On my way back through the living room, I saw his laptop screen briefly. He had shifted his position, and the screen was visible at an angle. It was not a job board. It was a game. A complicated, immersive, clearly long-running game, the kind that takes hours to make real progress in. I went to the dentist. I came back. He was asleep. That night, for the first time, I did something I had been resisting doing because I told myself it was an invasion of privacy. I went to Derek's social media profile, public, not private, open to anyone, and I scrolled. I went back 3 months, to right around the time he had moved in. I looked at everything he had posted. I want to tell you what I found, because it answered questions I had been refusing to ask myself directly. There were dozens of posts, screenshots of high scores, victories in online matches, celebrated with the enthusiasm of someone who had been playing long and hard enough to achieve something. Comments on friends' posts at all hours, midnight, 2 in the morning, 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday. The digital footprint of a person whose day had no structure imposed on it by any external obligation. No posts about job searching. No posts celebrating a callback or an interview. No posts about professional development or networking or any of the activities someone who was being strategic about their job hunt might have shared, even casually. Not one. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. I stood in my kitchen in the dark with the refrigerator hum and the distant sound of Derek's laptop from down the hall, and I allowed myself, for the first time, to name what I was looking at. I was looking at a man who had decided that the arrangement he had landed in was comfortable enough that he did not need to change it. And I was looking at a woman, my daughter, who was working hard enough for 2 people and either did not see this or had found a way to live around seeing it. I stood there for a long time. Then I made a decision. I decided that I would not be the villain in this story. I had seen what happened in other families when a mother stepped in too early, too directly, too loudly. The daughter chose the boyfriend. The mother became the enemy. The mother lost access to her daughter's life, and the daughter lost access to the one person in her corner who had never, not once, had anything other than her best interest at heart. I had seen it happen. I was not going to let it happen to me. Not when Claire finally had someone she looked at the way she looked at Derek. I would wait, I would watch, I would gather every single piece of information I needed until the picture was complete. And when I spoke, I would speak from evidence, not from feeling. I would not be dismissible. I would not be the difficult mother who couldn't give a man a fair chance. I would be undeniable. Month 4 is when Derek started speaking to me differently. It happened gradually enough that each individual change was technically negligible. But taken together, over the course of that 4th month, something had shifted in how he carried himself in my house. The deference of a guest had quietly evaporated. What replaced it was a comfort that had not been earned. He stopped asking before changing what was on the television. He had learned, apparently, that asking created an awkward moment, so he simply stopped asking. He would walk into the living room and change the input without checking whether I had any intention of using it. Usually, I did not. But the asking had not been about practicality. The asking had been about the acknowledgement that the television, like everything else in that room, was mine. He started commenting on my house, my choices, my routines, always framed as jokes, always delivered with enough of a smile that calling them out would have made me seem humorless. You know, Mrs. Johnson, if you moved that bookshelf, the room would open right up. Huh, Patricia, you really still get up at 6:30? That's dedication. Huh. I smiled every time. I answered the surface of the comment and ignored the current underneath it. I was storing everything. I was completing the picture. One evening in month 4, Claire sat at my kitchen table and told me, with careful neutrality, that Derek had mentioned feeling a little unwelcome sometimes, that he could sense some tension. She was not accusing me. I want to be clear about that. She was reporting carefully, the way someone does when they are trying to be fair to two people they care about simultaneously. He could sense tension. In my home? After 4 months of eating my food and sleeping in my room and sitting on my couch and paying nothing, contributing nothing, keeping nothing, honoring nothing, he could sense my tension. I told Claire I was sorry to hear that and I would try to be more welcoming. I said it calmly, and I meant it as I said it. And then I went to my room and I sat on the edge of my bed and I thought about it for a long time. And I realized something. I realized that a person who can afford to have feelings about the emotional atmosphere of someone else's home, a home he was occupying for free, a home he had done nothing to earn or maintain or deserve, was a person who had not yet had to reckon with reality. He was still operating inside a comfort zone that my daughter's work and my patience had collectively constructed for him. And inside that comfort zone, he had apparently developed the expectation of not just shelter and food and utilities, but also emotional validation. I filed that away. I added it to the picture I was building. The picture was almost complete. In month 5, I watched my daughter pick up a second shift. I knew about it because she mentioned it in passing too casually, the way you mention something you don't want examined. She said work had been busy and she had picked up some extra hours. I said that was a lot. She shrugged and said it was fine. She didn't mind. She said she was trying to put more aside in savings. She was putting more aside in savings, while the man she was saving for a future with was at that moment, at 2 in the afternoon, asleep in a room in my house. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in month 5. Up until month 4, I had been managing my feelings with a fair degree of success. I had been containable, watchful, patient in the deliberate way that a person is patient when patience is a strategy rather than a natural state. But in month 5, something harder began to settle in. Not anger, or not only anger, something closer to grief. Because the thing I was watching was not just a freeloading boyfriend in my guest room. The thing I was watching was my daughter, the girl I had shown, by example, every day of her life, what it looked like to work for what you had, to carry your own weight, to respect yourself enough not to accept less than you deserved, shrinking, very slowly, very quietly. The way a person shrinks when they have been managing someone else's needs for so long that they have quietly stopped asking whether their own are being met. She looked tired. She looked thinner. She laughed less quickly. She ate at my table with a gratitude that was a little too concentrated. The gratitude of someone who had not been allowing themselves enough of something. And he was in my guest room, sleeping. I started watching the trash, which is not something I am proud of, but which I will not apologize for either. I started paying attention to what came out of his room. Old food packaging delivery bags, mostly, from services that were not free. Packaging for things that had been ordered online. The cardboard inserts from products shipped to my address. I did not go through his trash deliberately. I saw things as they went into the communal trash can in the kitchen. I am observant. I have always been observant. It is a quality that served me well during 17 years of single parenthood, and it served me again in month 5. What I saw going into the trash told me that deliveries were arriving regularly, more regularly than could be explained by a person who was being financially cautious. I said nothing. I kept watching. I kept waiting for the complete picture. The day that changed everything was an ordinary Wednesday in month 5. I had worked a full day. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home because the kitchen was low on several things. I bought more than I needed, the way tired people do in grocery stores, and I drove home and carried the bags inside and put them on the counter and began putting things away. I noticed the kitchen trash can was full. This happened frequently, and usually I dealt with it without particular attention. I pulled the bag up by the top, the way you do, and as it came out of the can, the weight shifted, and 2 pieces of paper slipped out from between layers of other discarded things and fell to the floor. Receipts, face up on my kitchen floor. I should not have looked at them. I know there are people who would say that. I looked at them because they were face up on my floor, and the numbers on them were large enough that my eye arrived before my intention could intervene. I picked them up, I stood in my kitchen, and I read them. Both from the same online electronics retailer, both placed within the past 6 weeks, both paid by credit card to an address that was, as of the past 5 months, my address. And the items listed were not groceries. They were not professional necessities. They were not tools for a job search or a career pivot or any of the productive things that a man who had been describing himself as strategic about his future might reasonably purchase. Gaming equipment, a controller listed at $340, a headset at $180, a second monitor described in the item details as optimized for competitive play at $620, a piece of hardware for streaming gameplay online at $400, cables, stands, accessories, smaller items rounding out the total. I added it up on my phone calculator while standing in my kitchen with the fluorescent light overhead. $2,416. I added it up a second time. Same number. I stood completely still for a very long time. I thought about Claire picking up extra shifts. I thought about the tired look on her face. I thought about her eating at my table with that concentrated gratitude. I thought about her saying, almost in passing, that she had been trying to be more careful about spending lately. Being careful about spending. While the man she was supporting, because by month 5, I had assembled enough pieces to understand that she was absolutely, unmistakably, supporting him, had spent $2,416 on equipment for a hobby in the same 6 weeks. I folded the receipts. I put them in the pocket of my work jacket. I finished putting the groceries away. I made dinner something with pasta, a recipe I have made 100 times and can make on autopilot. I set 3 places at the table. Derek came out from his room while I was finishing, in a good mood, talkative, telling me about something he had seen online that had been funny. I passed the bread and nodded and smiled and said very little. After dinner, I washed the dishes. I could hear Derek in his room. I stood at the sink and I thought about the receipts in my pocket and the number on my calculator screen, still glowing in my memory, and I thought about the moment I had been waiting for through 5 months of careful patience. And I understood, in a way that moved through me like a slow tide, that the moment was not coming anymore. The moment was already here. It was tonight. Claire arrived around 7:30. She had come straight from work, still in her work clothes, a little creased from a long day, with the concentrated exhaustion of someone who had been on their feet since early morning. I made her sit down at the kitchen table. I put the kettle on. I sat across from her and asked her how she was. She said she was fine, quickly, the way she had been saying it for months. I asked her about the extra shifts. She shrugged and said it was temporary, said she was saving up. And here is the thing I want you to hear, because this is the detail that turned the tide of the evening. She smiled, a small, careful, brave smile, and she said that she and Derek had been talking about the future, that she had been putting aside a little money, she said, with the specific emphasis of someone who has very little left to put aside toward eventually planning a wedding. She said it the way she used to tell me things when she was small, and hoping I would match her excitement with that particular mixture of hope and vulnerability that breaks a mother's heart in the most tender possible way. She was saving for a wedding, with him, while working double shifts, while telling me she was being more careful with her spending. She was saving for a future, and she was building it almost entirely alone, and she was smiling about it at my kitchen table because she still believed in what she was building. Derek's voice came from the living room. He had heard. He got up and came to the kitchen doorway, and Claire told him what she had said to me, the same words, the same careful smile. She was sharing something she was proud of, something she had been holding quietly. He leaned against the doorframe, made a sound that was not quite dismissive but was not quite kind, said they could think about that when things were more settled. When he was more settled, said these things took time. Claire said she just wanted to start thinking ahead, start planning. And then Derek, who had shaken my hand at my front door and promised 2 weeks and a job starting Monday, stretched his arms above his head in a long, unhurried stretch, walked into my living room, lowered himself onto my couch with the ease of a man who had been doing it for 5 months and saw no end to it, leaned back against the cushions, and put both feet up on my coffee table. And then he laughed. He laughed the way people laugh when they are very comfortable, and the thing they are laughing about is something they expect to be laughed along with. He looked at Claire, not at me, and he said, "Maybe when your mom finally moves out." The room changed. I have thought about that moment many times since that evening. I have thought about the specific quality of the silence that followed his words. Claire did not laugh. She did not say anything. She just went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when something you have been telling yourself isn't true finally becomes impossible to pretend you haven't noticed. He was still smiling slightly, waiting for the tension to break, waiting for someone to laugh it off and let everything reset. I reached into my jacket pocket. I took out the 2 folded receipts. I stood up from the kitchen table. I walked into my living room. I put the receipts on the coffee table beside his feet, not under them, not thrown at him, placed there, the way you place something you want someone to look at directly. I sat down in the armchair across from the couch. I looked at him. I looked at my daughter in the doorway. I took a breath. And then I spoke. I said, "Derek, I am going to say something now, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. I have been very patient for a very long time, and what I have to say is important enough that I need it to land correctly. So, I am asking you to stay quiet until I am finished." He looked at the receipts. Something moved across his face: recognition, calculation, a brief flash of something that might have been the beginning of concern. I said, "You came into this house 5 months ago. You stood at my front door and you shook my hand and you told me 2 weeks. You said the job started Monday. I gave you 2 weeks. When 2 weeks passed without a job and without an explanation, I gave you 2 more. When that month was done, I gave you another month, and then another one after that, and then another. Because I believe in people, because I know what genuine hard times look like, and because my daughter loves you, and her happiness has always mattered more to me than my inconvenience. Neither of them spoke. Those pieces of paper on my table, I said, are receipts for $2,400 of gaming equipment, purchased in the last 6 weeks. During the same 6 weeks that my daughter has been picking up extra shifts, during the same period when she told me she was being careful with her spending, tonight she sat in my kitchen and told me she was saving for a future with you. She was proud of it. And you walked in here and put your feet on my table and made a joke about whether I was going to move out of my own home. I heard Claire make a small sound. I kept my eyes on Derek. I want to be clear about something, I said. This house is mine, not in a technical sense, though the mortgage and every bill attached to it have my name on them and no other name. Mine in the sense that I earned it. I worked for it for years, before I could afford it. I have paid for it every month since I bought it. I have fixed it, repainted it, maintained it, and filled it with things I chose because they belong to the life I was building for myself and my daughter. This is not a house I borrowed or inherited or had given to me. It is mine in the most complete possible sense of that word. I paused. I wanted that to settle before I continued. I have not asked you to leave in 5 months, I said, even when I could see what was happening. Even when the picture became very clear to me, I did not say anything because I love Claire, and I was not going to be the person who forced her to choose between her mother and the man she loves before she was ready to see what I was seeing. That was my choice, and I made it deliberately, and I do not regret it. Derek opened his mouth. I said, I am not finished. He closed it. What I regret, I said, is that my patience allowed this to go on long enough that my daughter is working 2 shifts a day and counting what she puts in savings, while the person she is counting on has spent $2,400 on gaming equipment and is sitting here right now making jokes about whose house this is. That is what I regret, not the patience, the length of it. I looked at Claire. She was standing very still in the kitchen doorway. Her arms were crossed over her chest, not defensively the way a person crosses their arms when they are holding themselves together. Claire, I said, I am not telling you what to do. You are 26 years old and you are the most capable person I have ever known, and I raised you to trust your own judgment because your judgment is good. I trust it now. Whatever you decide about your life, I will be here. I looked back at Derek one more time. What I am telling you, I said, is that the arrangement we made 5 months ago ended 4.5 months ago. You told me 2 weeks. I gave you 5 months. I gave you a room, food, utilities, and the kind of patience that very few people would have given as long as I gave it. What I will not give you, what I am not able to give you, is the right to sit in my living room and laugh at my daughter's plans while you are living on her labor. She deserves better than that. She has always deserved better than that, and I spent enough of my own life accepting less than I deserved to recognize it instantly when I see it happening to her. I stood up. I straightened my jacket. You have 2 weeks from today, I said. I will put the date on the kitchen calendar tonight so there is no ambiguity. I am not doing this in anger. I am not doing this to be difficult. I am doing it because it is the right thing to do and I should have done it sooner. And the only person responsible for the delay is me. I picked up the receipts from the table. I walked to the kitchen. I put them on the counter. I turned on the tap and began washing the dinner dishes. From the living room, nothing. Complete silence. And then, after what felt like a very long time but was probably 40 seconds, I heard my daughter's voice. It was quiet, but it was clear, clearer, I thought, than it had been in a long time. And whatever she was saying to Derek, I did not catch all of it, did not try to catch all of it, was being said without apology, without the careful management. I had been watching her perform for months, without the deflecting and the brightness and the practiced casualness. She was saying something real, in her own voice, as herself. I kept washing the dishes. I did not look around. I let her have the room. Derek left on day 11. Not dramatically, not with a scene. He packed his duffel bag and his backpack in the morning while I was at work and was gone by the time I came home. He left a box of cereal on the kitchen counter, half empty. He did not take the mug. Claire called me that evening. I had expected her to sound devastated. That is what I had steeled myself for. I had prepared to sit with her through whatever grief needed to move through her. But her voice, when she called, was different from what I had anticipated. She cried, but not the cry I had expected. It was a different kind of crying, the kind that happens when something you have been bracing against for a long time is finally over and the bracing can stop. It was, I thought, the cry of a person setting down a very heavy thing they had been holding so long they had almost forgotten they were holding it. She talked for a long time. She told me things she had not told me before, how much money she had covered over the 5 months, transportation, food deliveries, subscription services, things he needed. The number was not staggering, but it was real and it was hers. And it had come out of the savings account she had been quietly, carefully, determinedly building toward a future she had deserved to be building with someone who was building it alongside her. I listened. I did not say I knew. I did not say I saw it coming. I just listened. Then I asked her how she felt. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I feel like myself." She said it like she was slightly surprised by it, like she had been looking for herself for a while and had unexpectedly found her in the act of saying something true at my kitchen table. I told her that was exactly what it felt like when you set something down that you had been carrying too long. She came for dinner that Sunday. I made the pasta she had loved since she was small. We sat at my kitchen table and we talked for 3 hours about everything, her plans, her savings, her work, things she wanted that had nothing to do with anyone else, things she was allowing herself to want again. We talked about Me Too, which we hadn't done properly in months. We talked the way we used to talk, before her life got complicated and mine got quieter. And we both started choosing our words so carefully with each other that the real conversations got crowded out. It was the best Sunday I had spent in 5 months. I have been thinking, since that Wednesday evening, about what I want to say to anyone who might be where I was in month 1, or month 2, or month 3. Because I think there are a lot of people in those months right now, holding their patience, telling themselves just a little longer, trying not to be the difficult one, the unreasonable one, the person who can't just let things go. Maybe it is a mother like me. Maybe it is a spouse, a sibling, a friend, a roommate. Maybe the person taking up more space than they were invited to take is not a boyfriend on a couch, but something else entirely. Maybe it is a job that takes and gives back less every year. Maybe it is a friendship that is entirely one direction. The specific arrangement does not matter as much as the feeling, that slow, quietly suffocating feeling of giving someone something they have decided is simply theirs to keep. If you are in that feeling right now, I want to say something to you. Patience is not the same as permission. Waiting is not the same as accepting. Staying quiet while you complete the picture is not the same as deciding the picture is acceptable to you. These are not the same things, and the world will try very hard to convince you they are, because the world is generally more comfortable when the person with the grievance stays quiet rather than the person causing it. Do not let the world confuse you on that point. I do not regret being patient. I regret the length of the patience. I should have spoken a month sooner. possibly two, but I do not regret the patience itself. Because by the time I spoke, I had everything I needed. I had 5 months of evidence. I had $2,400 of receipts folded in my jacket pocket. I had the memory of my daughter's face going quiet in my own living room. I had a complete and undeniable picture. And when I opened my mouth, I was not speaking from wounded feelings or from a moment of temper that could be waited out. I was speaking from knowledge, from certainty, from a place no one could dismiss, diminish, reframe, or redirect. I was calm, I was clear, I was done. And here is the thing I have learned. Over 54 years and a marriage that ended, and 18 years of building a life alone, and this particular 5-month education in the cost of too much patience. When you finally speak from that place, the place of complete certainty, the place where you know exactly what you are looking at and exactly who you are while you are looking at it. You do not need to be loud. You do not need to be cruel. You do not need an audience or a dramatic moment or the perfect words prepared in advance. The truth, delivered from that place, carries its own weight. It does not need your volume to make it land. It just needs to be said by someone who is not afraid of it anymore. There was one more thing that happened that I have not told you yet, because I was not sure how to include it. About 2 weeks after Derek left, Claire came to me with something she had apparently been sitting with since the evening at my kitchen table. She said she had been thinking about how long she had known, underneath everything, that something was wrong. She said she had not let herself see it fully, because seeing it fully meant she would have to do something about it. And doing something about it meant admitting that she had been wrong about a person she had invested real hope in. I understood that completely. I told her so. She said she had been angry at first, not at Derek, not at me, but at herself, for missing it, for working 2 shifts and saving a little money toward a future while the evidence of where things really stood was sitting in a room in her mother's house, eating food that her mother bought. I told her that was the wrong place to put the anger, that the most sophisticated con artists in the world take advantage of people who are generous and trusting and willing to believe in someone's potential. That being deceived by a person who is practiced at being comfortable does not make you foolish. It makes you human. She said, "But you saw it." I said, "I saw it because I was not in love with him. I could afford to see it. You couldn't. That is not a character flaw. That is just the math of caring about someone." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she thought she was going to be okay. I told her I had known that since she was 9 years old, standing on a soccer field with her father gone and her whole life rearranged, and she had tucked her shirt in and run across the field without looking back. She laughed, the real laugh, the one I had been waiting to hear for 5 months. And that laugh, in my kitchen, on a Tuesday evening with the 2 of us at the table, where we have sat together through everything that has mattered in both our lives, that laugh was worth every single day of patience I had spent getting there. I know who I am. I am a woman who bought a house alone and raised a daughter in it and paid for every room and every piece of furniture in it with my own hands and my own labor over 23 years. I am a woman who gives people the benefit of the doubt because she knows from personal experience what genuine hardship looks like. I am a woman who loves her daughter enough to wait until she is certain before she speaks, because a truth that lands before someone is ready to hear it does more damage than silence. And I am a woman who, when someone puts their feet on her coffee table and laughs at her daughter's future as though it is a punchline, reaches into her pocket, sets 2 folded receipts on the table, sits down, and says, "Hear me. He told me 2 weeks. I gave him 5 months." And the evening I finally sat in my own living room and told the truth, clearly, calmly, completely, without retreat, was the first evening in 5 months that I went to bed feeling entirely like myself. Not because he left, not because I won something because my daughter stood in my kitchen doorway and found her voice again. And because no one, not ever, not in any house I have built or will build, not while I have breath in my body, gets to make the woman I raised feel that the life she is working for is something to laugh at. Not once. Not ever. Not in my house.